I was privileged to travel through Palestine, through the West Bank and Gaza with the Episcopal Peace Network. And I was the only Jewish person on that delegation, I think the only non-clergy, and I got to see what witnessing meant from a Christian perspective and compare that with what I was experiencing as a Jewish person. We went to, as I said, the West Bank and Gaza, and I kept asking myself, what am I doing here? I'm an activist for Palestinian liberation. I know what to do in the United States. I know how to go to legislative offices. I know how to be a rally speaker. I know how to organize an educational event. What the heck am I doing there? I felt useless, right? And I felt everything I saw in the West Bank that was horrible had a Star of David on it. And that is, I'm Jewish. And am I here to cry? What am I here to do? And I carried that question. The Episcopal folks had different answers to that question. They didn't have the sense of burning shame that I did. And then we went to Gaza. And there had been, one of the Israeli sort of like brutal carpet bombings, and whole neighborhoods were decimated. We visited schools that were trying to work with children who had experienced massive, widespread, wall-to-wall trauma. That didn't stop. A feature of Gaza during the bombings at that time, now it's unspeakable, was there was no safe space to go. The nature of the family structure was degraded by the fact that children who would look to their parents and say, keep me safe, and the parents had no way of doing that. And children could see that the parents had no way of keeping them safe. There was no safe place to go. And so the whole fabric of child-parent relationships and the sense of trust that's needed in order to constitute a family was coming apart. And there were no therapists. We went to the Gaza mental health network. And there were no therapists that could treat what was going on, because the therapists, when hearing the stories of the folks that they were talking to, weren't just experiencing secondary trauma. They were reliving their primary trauma. They were cataloging new forms of psychopathic illness because their situation was unprecedented. I saw pictures. I went to sites where they were where people were trying to work with children to heal, and the children's art was beyond nightmare, just sort of like ripped up dolls, sort of like doused in red paint. And our delegation stuck out like a sore thumb, right? This is not a place where people from outside of Palestine were allowed in and out. It was shut, and we were clearly not from there. And people would come to us with their stories. They weren't just shut up in this nightmare. They were shut up in this nightmare, and had this sense that nobody cared, that there were no voices in the outside world that would care. I didn't know what I could do. I didn't know how I was needed. I'd never sort of thought about what it meant to bear witness, and here I was, being asked to be the repository of these stories, and I needed to grow in order to be strong enough to be able to carry these stories with me. I crumbled under the suffering. I couldn't bear it. But I don't have the right to scream like somebody in Gaza who's lost their whole family has the right to scream. What I'm able to do, but to find a way to beam a light into what's going on in Gaza, to beam a light into Gaza so people could see what's happening there on their own terms. So I didn't come to politics through religion, I came to religion through politics. And the responsibility that being in Gaza gave me to bear witness in a responsible and a sort of religiously grounded sense.
Learning and leaning into my own pastoral calling led me to my most important work here in Austin, which started at the pro-Palestinian protests at the University of Texas. My congregation is right across the street And when students were being brutalized by police and tear gassed literally across the street from my church, we were able to open our doors and become a respite center and lost and found, and just have learned so much from community organizers here and from students at the University of Texas these last couple of years, and been able to continue that work. I think that work drew me deeper into Palestinian liberation work and sent me to the West Bank last fall. And so seeing the confinement of communities, the gates that can cut people off from each other at a moment's notice, in person and up close, caring for each other and caring for foreigners, which turned out on my trip to be me. I ended up with a health crisis. I had a late-term pregnancy loss while I was in the West Bank. And and received just the most beautiful sense of community and care from folks in the church and in the public hospital and in the hotel that we were staying at. I want to bear witness to the hospitality that I received, even in a hospital where I did not speak the language, and all I had to show them was my American passport, which, I mean, I was able to receive the care that I needed, that I have to say I don't know if I could have received in Texas, because what I needed, even though the baby was delivered, was D&C, and that is a really contested procedure here. But they saved my life, regardless of where I was from. So I just think it's such. I don't think that I know what to do to help those communities, but I feel like there's so much to learn about how to be community from the folks that I met there. And I think that in my little bit of grief and suffering, the ways that they surrounded me was just really life-changing and transformative. Obviously, my suffering was so small compared to, it doesn't compare. But I think that part of me is always there now. Even if your suffering is not like having a miscarriage in Palestine, our suffering here is not separate from their suffering there. Our suffering is all connected. And what we're seeing here, particularly with immigrants and migrants, is incredibly connected. I think that Christian nationalism that, is racist and xenophobic and supremacist and is treating our migrant siblings with so much disdain and causing so much suffering is just one side of a double-sided coin. The other side is Christian Zionism, or maybe Zionism, but I'll speak from my own tradition. These things are not disconnected. They come from the same place of racism and of supremacy and of empire, to be honest. And so what's happening there is not disconnected from what's happening here, and we can't just address our issues here while, the bleeding on the other side of the world is not being stopped. So I don't know who you all are, if you're in churches or if you're pastors or what your lives are like. But one thing that we can do is speak out against Christian nationalism and Christian Zionism. So this is our issue. This isn't something that we get to sit out as followers of Jesus, for those of you who are.
This is an invitation for us to not participate in the ideas that we've been given about borders. So that's going to be a challenging idea, because we've always been taught to care about what happens within our borders. Keep us safe from immigrants, keep us safe from those Muslim countries, as they like to say, from Hamas, from Hezbollah, and it's all propaganda. The reality is that if we are Christian, but even if you're not Christian, if you're not a person who is religious, that what does ground us in human rights? And borders don't do that. Borders are liars. Borders confine our moral imagination, and they have for so long. So we know they're lying to us when they say immigrants are murderers and rapists and drug dealers and all sorts of other things, right? This is what they've been telling us about people across the globe, so that we can cheer when the bombs fall, so that we can say, oh, that's right, we're safer. We're safer from the nuclear bombs or from the sleeper cells or whatever other lies they want to tell us. So the challenge for us and the invitation is for us not to think within borders anymore. That robs us of moral imagination. The lies we've been told about immigrants are the lies we've been told about Palestinians, the lies that we've been told about Iranians, about people that we never met, that people don't know, to countries they've never been, but they're so sure to speak about. So it's an invitation for us to not think within borders and not to think that the U.S. is exceptional. This, I will say, is sin. It is sin to think that this nation is exceptional and to not be honest about its foundations, which history is not just in the past, history is always ongoing. And if you are unhappy with ICE, welcome to what Palestinians have been experiencing with Israel. And we have to be honest about it, because there are people that we know, that we're in relationship with, that we work with, who are going to tell us different about Israel. And it means something different to them because they probably don't know either what Dr. Norman described, what Reverend Natalie described. Because what Israel is doing is what the U.S. is doing, within our borders and outside our borders. So we have to tell the truth. And we have to not think within borders. It's an invitation to tell the truth. It's an invitation to not think within borders. It's an invitation not to think, I'm proud to be an American. No, I am proud to love other people, no matter where they're from. And I'm not proud of what this country is doing, and I'm not proud of its origins. And that doesn't make me a bad person. That makes me honest. That makes all of us honest. We are not better and more worthy than anyone else around this globe. If you are against apartheid in South Africa, if you are against segregation in the US, then you should not support Israel. And you should encourage everyone you know the same. And if they are unsure, invite them and invite yourself to listen to what leaders from South Africa said when they visited Israel decades ago. And they said, oh wow, this is worse than apartheid South Africa. And they said it decades ago. So imagine what it is now. And if we do not want that for us and the people we love, then we do not want it for anyone across the globe.